It was supposed to be just a special day. A birthday, a decorated table, balloons tied to the chairs, the smell of freshly baked cake, and that sweet celebratory atmosphere that makes the heart beat lighter. The family was gathered in the living room, chatting, laughing, and sharing old memories, while I watched everything, trying to control my anxiety. There was a different kind of expectation in the air, something silent, almost invisible, but present in every gaze. Since childhood, that family clock had represented more than just a valuable object. It was a symbol of honor, of continuity, of being recognized as an important part of our home's history. And on that day, I was sure that this moment would finally be mine. My parents approached with smiles that held a hint of mystery. My brother sat beside me as if expecting something grand, and I, trying not to show my nervousness, simply smiled. Everyone stopped to watch. Silence, expectation, and then everything changed. The coveted watch, inherited through generations, didn't come to me. It was given to my brother with pride and emotion in my parents' eyes. Applause, congratulations, and I, trapped in a moment that lasted an eternity. The smile on my face weighed heavily, my thoughts became jumbled, and my heart tightened in an unexpected way. That day I realized that gifts can reveal much more than love. They can reveal secrets, silent preferences, hidden stories, and truths that no one dares to speak aloud. That celebration, which should have been mine, became the moment I discovered what it truly meant to be part of that family. What no one knew, however, was that I also brought a gift, and it would change everything. Growing up in my family was always a curious balance between affection and comparison. My parents were never cold or distant. On the contrary, they always gave us love, education, and structure. However, there was an invisible line dividing me and my brother, and even though no one spoke about it openly, everyone noticed. He was always the pride of the house, the eldest son, the most extroverted, the one who seemed to have been born already carrying expectations and applause. I, on the other hand, was the most reserved, the one who built silently, who achieved through effort and kept victories inside, waiting to be noticed without needing to shout. This never completely bothered me, until I noticed over the years small signs. When my brother got a good grade, it was a big deal. When I did, it was just good job. When he dreamed big, everyone encouraged him. When I dreamed quietly, they seemed to doubt me. Still, I loved them, and I wanted to believe it was all just an impression, that love isn't measured in applause or demonstrations. In our family, there was a symbol of honor, my great-grandfather's watch, an old, heavy piece of gold, steeped in history, passed down through generations to the son, representing continuity, responsibility, and trust. From a young age, I watched my father carefully cleaning that watch, telling stories of how his father gave it to him in a moment of pride and recognition. For me, that object wasn't just an accessory, it was the crowning achievement of being seen, of being valued, of being an essential part of the family lineage. And, deep in my heart, I believed that one day it would be my turn. But silent favoritism takes deep root. I always felt that, despite the smiles and hugs, there was a choice already made, a path already decided, and that I was always one step behind. The watch, more than gold or tradition, represented that feeling, the quest to be seen with the same brilliance that had always been given to it. From childhood, that watch wasn't just an object to me, it was a dream carefully guarded in my heart. While other children dreamed of toys, trips, or shiny things, I found myself gazing at my father's wrist, observing every detail of the family watch, as if it told more than just the hours, as if it carried stories, responsibilities, and an entire legacy within its silent mechanism. Many nights, sitting beside him on the sofa, I would ask to hold it for a while. My father would smile, carefully remove the watch from his wrist, and say that I needed to be worthy of carrying such an important symbol, and at that moment my heart would fill with hope. I kept those words as a promise. I studied, I worked hard, I built my path with responsibility, discipline, and quiet pride. Every achievement I experienced in adulthood had deep down an image, me receiving that watch from my father's hands, just as he received it from my grandfather. It was more than an inheritance, it was recognition, a confirmation that I too was part of history, that someone saw my effort and dedication. As my birthday approached, my heart raced. I felt this was the moment. There were signs, whispered conversations, knowing glances between my parents, an air of secrecy, and I allowed my heart to believe. After all, my whole life I had prepared myself to be worthy of that legacy. I wasn't expecting something material. I was expecting meaning, the kind of gift that doesn't fit in a box, confirmation that I was seen, valued, and loved in the same way. For many, that watch would just be an antique. For me, it was a symbol that, finally, someone recognized my effort, my loyalty, and the place I had built within that family. I didn't want gold. I wanted belonging. And on that day, I truly believed I would be the chosen one. The moment had arrived. The lights in the room seemed brighter, as if the entire atmosphere was focused on that instant. My parents asked for silence, and all eyes turned to them, including mine. My heart was racing, almost as if it wanted to burst out of my chest. They smiled, exchanged a quick glance, and my father put his hand in the inside pocket of his jacket. I recognized the gesture immediately. It was the same one he made when he needed to get something important, something valuable. My chest filled with emotion, and an almost childlike anticipation took hold of me. I truly believed that this moment would finally be mine. But then, like an icy wind through closed doors, reality hit. My father turned not to me, but to my brother. He opened the small leather case, and there it was, the watch, the family watch, the symbol I had carried as hope for years. Everyone around smiled. My brother's eyes widened in surprise and happiness, and applause echoed through the room. I stood motionless. It seemed as if time had stopped. Ironic, considering a clock was at the center of it all. My lips tried to form a smile, but it was heavy, painful, almost choked. The sound of congratulations to my brother echoed in the distance, as if I had been suddenly placed outside the world, and inside me there was a deafening silence. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't protest. I only felt an enormous emptiness opening up inside my chest, as if everything I had done up to that point had never been enough. In that second, I realized something that hurt more than losing the watch. This wasn't a choice made that day. It was a decision built up over years, silently but clearly. I was loved, yes, but always one step behind, always the other. And even though I tried to hide the pain, it burned intensely, like a truth that had finally found its light. The celebration continued, but inside me, something had changed forever. I didn't lose a watch. I lost hope. While I remained seated, trying to reorganize my own thoughts and hold the weight that was forming in my chest, the room continued, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, at least not for anyone else. My parents, with almost disconcerting naturalness, continued to distribute smiles and words of love to my brother, celebrating the well-deserved passing of the clock, as if that tradition were so obvious that it didn't even need to be discussed. They spoke with pride, recalled moments from his childhood, extolled his qualities and achievements, and I listened to everything in silence, feeling how each compliment reinforced the position I had always occupied without wanting to admit it, that of a supporting character in my own story. My brother, excited, tested the watch on his wrist, adjusted the clasps, turned his arm to see how it shone in the light. He seemed genuinely happy and perhaps innocent in his joy. Maybe he hadn't noticed the silent storm brewing inside. Temesa, or maybe he had noticed but chose to ignore it. After all, he was used to being the center of attention, to receiving, to being seen. For him, that moment was naturally his, as if it had been destined for him. The family around me laughed, made comments, some even a little competitive. We always knew who would inherit this. It looks perfect on your arm. It's tradition, isn't it? Phrases said without apparent malice, but which cut like sharp knives every time they reached my ears. It was like watching a play where everyone knew the script except me, and that feeling of inadequacy, of being less, of never being chosen, grew like a knot rising from my throat to my eyes. I tried to maintain my composure. I tried to smile. I tried to appear strong, polite, indifferent, but inside the pain burned, and the room, filled with voices and laughter, seemed increasingly suffocating. It wasn't anger exactly. It was a different kind of pain, the pain of realizing that, even loving deeply, I might never be seen the way I always hoped to be. And that night it was as if everyone was celebrating something, while I silenced the part of me that still believed I would be chosen one day. Amidst the laughter, the comments, and all that celebration that seemed to effortlessly exclude me, something inside me simply awakened. It wasn't revenge, nor a desire to humiliate anyone. It was a need to reclaim my voice, my place, and the piece of dignity that seemed to have slipped through my fingers at that moment. I took a deep breath, felt the air weigh on my lungs, and calmly stood up from my chair. The conversations continued for a few seconds, until my posture caught their attention. I smiled, not a bitter smile, but a tranquil, almost liberating smile. "I also have something to share today." My voice came out firm, even though my heart was pounding. Everyone turned to me, curious. I took the envelope I had kept in my pocket, discreet, simple, but full of meaning. It wasn't expected, nobody knew. I handed the paper to my father, who opened it naturally, until his gaze froze. My brother approached, his expression confused. My mother, upon reading the first line, put her hand to her mouth. Absolute silence. It was as if time, the same time that moments before had crushed me emotionally, was now trapped at my feet. The deed to the house, my name, my grandparents' signatures. It wasn't just a document. It was a choice made months before, silently, without fanfare, without the spotlight. A recognition I hadn't asked for, but which came to me like a balm after years of inner silence. I explained calmly, my grandparents entrusted me with the family home. They saw responsibility, maturity, and consistency in me, and they decided to give me a gift. When they realized that I was walking with humility and effort, even without always being seen, the room seemed to move in slow motion. My father blinked, trying to find words. My brother held the clock as if it had suddenly lost some of its luster. My mother, overcome with emotion, swallowed hard. There were no screams, no scandalous shock, just that silent, heavy revelation that changes everything without needing a sound. And I just stood there, firm, present, for the first time without needing to want to be seen, because now there was no way to ignore me. The watch on my brother's wrist marked the time, but in that second, for the first time, time finally seemed to be mine. When the silence became unbearable, I took a deep breath and told the truth, a truth that until that moment I had kept with respect and humility. My grandparents were always observant. Calmly, patiently, they saw beyond words and grand gestures. They saw the quiet effort, the silent constancy, the responsibility that didn't need to be displayed. In many conversations with them, I never complained, never asked for recognition. I simply shared my life, my plans, my discreet victories, and it was from this simplicity that their decision was born. "You were always strong without demanding applause," my grandfather told me the day he handed me the deed. "Your worth isn't in what people expect of you, but in what you build when no one is watching." I remember those words as if they were etched into my skin. Right then I realized that even without applause, someone saw me. Someone saw my worth, not for my shine, but for my character. My grandparents also knew about the favoritism that, for years, had seeped into our family dynamic. They never judged my parents, nor did they blame them. They simply decided to balance what life, perhaps unintentionally, had unbalanced. The house wasn't a prize. It was a silent recognition, an affirmation that value isn't measured by applause but by truth. They wanted me to have something that represented trust, legacy, and love, true love, the kind that sees without needing to be shown. As I explained this, I saw in my parents' eyes something between surprise and reflection, perhaps a hint of regret. My brother, still with his watch on his wrist, seemed to stare at the floor as if trying to understand exactly when things had taken such different paths for us. There was no euphoria, no victories there. There was understanding, a truth that had always existed but that no one dared to speak. That moment wasn't about status, nor about who won more. It was about emotional justice, about being seen, about silent deservingness, and above all, about the kind of love that doesn't need to shout to be real, because sometimes life finds gentle and sure ways to put everything in its place. When I finished speaking, the silence in the room felt like a thick wall, difficult to break through. My parents finally took a deep breath, as if searching for words to justify years of choices that, until then, had never been questioned. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with a desperate attempt to maintain emotional control. "We never wanted to hurt you, you know that," she said, her eyes shining. My father added, trying to sound rational, "We always did everything with love. Your brother is the oldest, and that's how the tradition worked." I listened respectfully, but the weight on my chest didn't lessen. It wasn't about tradition. It wasn't about age. It was about years of small choices that created an invisible abyss, a favoritism never declared, but always felt. So, calmly, without raising my voice, I said, "Gifts show what's in the heart. Not the material value, but the intention. Today it became clear what you saw in each of us." These words weren't accusations. They were naked truth, finally finding its voice. My brother looked at me uncomfortably, holding the watch as if its weight had shifted. My parents tried to argue, saying I'd always been strong, that they'd never needed to worry about me, that perhaps that's why they'd shown more attention to my brother. And that's when the wound spoke. Being strong doesn't mean not needing love. Being silent doesn't mean not feeling. The memories came flooding back, one after another. Forgotten dates, minor celebrations, compliments that always seemed reserved. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the truth take its place for the first time. The room seemed smaller, everyone's breathing heavier. They finally saw something I'd carried for years, the simple desire to be recognized, not for grand gestures, but for presence, for equality, for love that doesn't measure, doesn't compare, and doesn't choose favorites. There was no vengeful bitterness in my gaze, only a silent plea for understanding. And in that moment, I realized that the most important thing had already happened. I was no longer invisible. I had finally been seen. After that silent yet profoundly truthful confrontation, something shifted in the air of the room. There was no more laughter, nor the festive atmosphere of minutes before. Instead, there was reflection, heavy, necessary, inevitable. My parents remained silent for long seconds, perhaps reliving years of small decisions that, added together, had built an invisible wall between us. My brother, still holding the watch, seemed to finally see its shine in a different light, not as a trophy but as a symbol that carried too much emotional weight to be ignored. Gradually, the words began to come out, this time with fewer justifications and more truth. My parents acknowledged that, yes, they had always trusted me in a silent way, but in doing so, they had forgotten to show affection and recognition in equal measure. They recognized that they hadn't realized the impact of these choices, and that perhaps, unintentionally, they had created an emotional hierarchy within the family. There were no perfect excuses, only humanity, and I accepted it, because I never sought perfection. I only sought to be seen. My brother, in turn, approached with a sincere look, somewhat lost between guilt and surprise. He said he had never paid attention to that difference, and perhaps that was part of the problem. For those who always receive, it's easy to believe that everything is balanced. I hugged him, not as a theatrical gesture, but as a sign that grievances, when acknowledged, can become bridges. He continued with the watch, and I continued with the deed. But at that moment, the value of the objects dissolved. It wasn't about what we held in our hands, it was about what had finally been brought to light. The lesson was clear. Sometimes gifts don't shape history, they only reveal what was already written in the heart. And on that day, we all learned that recognition, love, and presence are worth more than any tradition or inheritance. Reconciliation didn't erase the past, but it opened space for a more just, more conscious, and above all, more truthful future. Because, in the end, what truly matters isn't what you receive, but what you feel, what you build, and what you learn when the truth finally finds the courage to be born. When the night ended, nothing was the same as before. The table was still there, the cake still intact, the candles already blown out, but the atmosphere had completely changed. It was no longer just a birthday, it was a turning point. I went into that celebration expecting an object, a tradition, a symbolic gesture, but I left with something much greater: truth, recognition, and clarity. And perhaps for the first time, I realized that true value lies not in what they give you, but in who you become along the way. I didn't need applause or spotlights. I didn't need to raise my voice or prove anything to anyone. I simply let time, the same time marked by the watch on my brother's wrist, reveal what had always been there: silent effort, dignity, love without competition, and the certainty that what is truly ours never needs to be taken from anyone. My life didn't change because I received a deed. My life changed because, on that day, I stopped seeking validation where it never came and found my strength within myself. And now I ask you, who are listening to this story, have you ever felt undervalued by someone you love? Have you ever experienced moments when your effort, affection, or dedication went unnoticed? If so, know that you are not alone. Sometimes life seems unfair, But there is a silent force working in our favor, and it appears at the right moment with the exact intensity. If this story touched your heart, share your experience in the comments below. Share your voice, your feelings, because stories like this only gain meaning when they encounter other similar stories along the way. And if you want to hear more remarkable, moving, and instructive accounts like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each story is an opportunity to reflect, grow, and discover that in the end, what truly matters never fits in a box. It fits within us.